We have two things that might take up some time to talk about. One is, of course, the technical update. And the other is Steve Ross Talbot will give a presentation of the first round of ideation workshop results. So, Rao, are you ready to take it away?
I shared the link to the community update in the chat. Let me share my screen. I think you should be able to see it now. So the status of the versions, release versions remains roughly the same as last week. There is one other change we're pushing into the current 0923 LTS that's running on the mainnet. So I'll speak to that in just a minute. The new optimization that we are pushing in is setting the fault tolerance to 1 for old blocks. And what this does is it cuts down some of the time that's necessary for processing, because currently what's happening is that no matter how old the block is, we're still having to, or the code is calculating the fault tolerance for each of the blocks. So obviously, as you get more blocks, that becomes complicated. With the work that we have done in the last finalized block, we're now able to say with confidence that, for these things, you really don't need to calculate fault tolerance again and again. So we have that, and that because of the gains we get there, that eliminates some of the hang-up, network hangs and errors that we're getting from that. So it's not pushed to the mainnet yet, but it'll be pushed soon. NetZipper is working on that. And the other changes that are in the 0923 LTS I already spoke to last week. There was quite a bit of work done this past week on improving the APIs for the exchanges. Specifically, we have put configuration on the API server, and then we are investigating some of the bugs. The other thing we did is the ability to visualize the DAG from any point, as opposed to, the way it is right now is that you have to start from the most recent and then go back. But now we have the ability to, when we see an issue, we're just able to look at a part of the DAG that's relevant for that. There is an occasional error that occurs with this tuple space error. Tuple space mismatch rather. We don't quite, it happens somewhat non-deterministically at this point in time, so we're investigating that. And we think some of the changes that were made so far will at least reduce that. If not, they'll give us a good handle on understanding where that error is still prevalent. Now, related to that, I spoke about gRPC proxy on each of the nodes on the mainnet. Right now, it's not on the mainnet yet, but we have been testing it on testnet and sandbox. So that should give us a good way to relate the traffic that's coming into the errors that are occurring as to under what conditions, because it is somewhat non-deterministic under what conditions we are running into this error. So that's one thing. There is still a case occasionally, we haven't seen it lately in the last few days, but there was, at least as of last week, we would see occasional CPU spikes. That's the other error, that having this sort of traffic logs will help us understand where that is happening and what may be causing that. So that's the kind of a lot of bug fixing and hardening the network as we discover issues. That's where we're spending a fair amount of time. Now, there has been substantial progress on the last finalized block. We now have an initial version of the last finalized block code in the dev release, or rather in the PRs and in the dev release. And we also have the ability to check in the APIs if a block is the last finalized block or not. What this does is it gives us now the ability to use that to implement the improvements that we spoke to and Greg spoke to in, I think about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So like one of the things, for example, we can do is that we can do replays from the most recent or last finalized block as opposed to having to go back earlier than that. So that would lead to a performance improvement. Just to remind folks on the relevance of this last finalized block, I'm going to point you to, I hope you're able to see my mouse on this. So this is the faster catch-up by new nodes and the offloading the older data and doing differentiated storage and retrieval strategies, and a leaner, less bloated node. These are some of the things that would be enabled by this last finalized block. And it actually enables quite a few things in the rest of the code, what we're doing, to be optimized and be faster. So that's what is good about that. Let me see, I already spoke to that. So as of now, basically, we have 2 exchanges, MXC and Hotbit. Last couple of weeks, there was quite a bit of dynamic requests and feature development on the APIs to support the exchanges, troubleshoot those APIs, and resolve issues and all of that. So that seems to have now somewhat stabilized with the 2 exchanges online, MXC and Hotbit are the 2 that are on. Then we are doing, still continuing, Grinder and NutZipper are working on cleaning up the configuration scripts, making sure that the configuration scripts on each of the networks, the sandbox, the testnet, and the mainnet, are correct for their particular purposes, what needs to be done, changing the parameters, Docker images, image changes, and all that. So that's ongoing. One of the things Grinder is working on is, looking into what all ports are available, what are the firewall settings, are these the right things, and cleaning them up as we go along. So that should give us better security and enhanced responsiveness. The documentation work last week had been a bit slow, but we'll pick it up. I mean, we don't have enough resources to focus on it. And of course, any technical documentation also takes developers' time for somebody to, even if somebody is available to sit down and work with them, they still need to work with the developers to get that going. So we're trying to do that along the way. So that's kind of where we are. We had a nice session this last Tuesday in the Tuesday teach outs. Tomislav and Arthur Brief covered the one of the proposals that Arthur Grief put together. So definitely take a look at that session, and anybody that wants to help out with any development activities, we more than welcome you. We have some Rolang work in the sharding contract that if somebody wants to take on, that's available. And then there are other pieces. In that area, what we're doing is, what we're going to do is start putting out issues on GitHub as GitHub issues, so that people with the right skill sets can then start working on them and move the project along. So that's where we are. And then Thursday, tomorrow, 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific, there's a tech governance call. So those interested in tech governance and how you can propose PRs or other changes and feature requests, etc., to RChain for RChain improvement, please do participate in that. That's normally a quite focused and active work group that goes on Thursdays. That's, I think, what I have. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the tech part? Over to you, Greg.
Thank you. That's good. I really am looking forward to the last finalized state completion. There's been a lot of good work in this regard. It's cleaned up the code base, and we'll see some significant performance improvements as a result. So yeah, I think this is really, really worthwhile effort. I think the next thing is Steve Ross Talbot. Are you ready to talk about the ideation?
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
Okay.
Well, let's
Right,
hand it over to you.
Screen. I'm going to pay a link. So that's what I'm looking at, which I've pasted. And I've sent it out on DApps ideas. So if you happen to follow it, you should see more or less what you're seeing now. There's 3 tabs. There's a README. There's the results and consolidated votes. So if I do this backwards, consolidated votes, this is all the voting. And there's person 1 to person 8 that voted. These were the names of the ideas on the far left, and then the votes came. MCI is most community impact, B is best enhancement. Sounds like the Oscars. And then over at the far right, I've totaled various things up. So I've looked at the total scores for most investable, for most community impact, for best enhancement. And I've also looked at, just because I was interested, I wanted to see how many not applicables some of them got, to see the utility across all the categories. And this is a measure of that utility. The lower the number, the higher the utility, right? Because they only got 1 not applicable. So then I summarized the results, which is the results here. And this was, oh, there is a mistake here actually, because that shouldn't be there, that one. I think that one, I'll delete that now. That's just a typo. So there's 6 that come out of this exercise as the top ones to go forward to another round, where you're going to get asked to rank these 6, 1 highest, 6 lowest. So 1 being most desirable, 6 being least desirable, from a, this would do the co-op the most immense of, give the co-op most immense of value, the most value in seeking additional investment, additional support from whomsoever. So it would go into the RChain, potentially the RChain investment deck and any investment collateral. So you need to rank these, and the top 3 will be the ones that the board will specifically give time to over and above the others. And that's simply because there isn't enough time in the day and there aren't enough people. But the aim is that the board members involved, there may be more than 1 per idea, will look to bottom out the MVP in terms of the user stories and work with whoever idea this is to put together an investment deck to enable that idea to go and seek investment. And we'll get our Rolodexes out as best we can to see if we can help that happen. So this table below is just the results brought forward from the previous sheet, just focusing on not the individual votes, but the summaries. And then you've got the utility winners. So the ones with the lowest utility score actually meant they had the highest utility value. These are the 3 that become candidates. then these three become candidates in the most investable idea category. And then you get the most community impact 3, and then you get the best enhancement. So then what we did was we removed the best enhancements ones, because best enhancements should be done by the co-op itself. It's not about putting together an external investment pitch for an idea that's something that should be with it, as it were, within the RChain platform as a whole. So we took these ones out, and then we were left with these 6. These were the top 6. So these 6 go into another ranking exercise, and this is the text in the README that tells you what to do. So you rank them, as I said, 1 to 6. Stick those ranks on Discord in the DApps Ideas channel. Closing is end of the week, so it's midnight PST, 15th of May. After that time, when I get up, I will have a look to see what those votes are, compile a results sheet, and then I guess at the next community meeting, I think we should probably formally announce the winners and try and figure out which board members are going to support which ideas, and how the owner of the idea wants to run with that. Because what's important is that whoever owns the idea, it's your idea, it's for you to run with. What we're giving you is resource to put together an investment deck. On the RChain side, what we get is some great user stories for some great ideas that show the utility value of RChain in and of itself. And that's what we need from a board perspective, because that will help us shape a longer term strategy and help us perhaps deal with some of the short-term funding issues. We'll certainly contribute to that. And that's it. Are there any questions from anyone?
Yeah, I just want to comment that I guess we're announcing them now, but then the actual prizes will be given out, or the rev would be given out upon MVP delivery. Is that correct? Or
That's correct. So it's in our interest as RChain board members to make sure that these things get funding from an appropriate place, so that they can get to MVP, because it's in our interest, simply to show the utility value of RChain itself. So it's a good marriage of interests, I think. It's a coming together. But yes, the rev for the prizes will be delivered on the MVP going live on RChain. Then your rev gets credited to you. So I would just ask everybody to have a go at deciding which are the top 3 at least. Ideally do all 6, but you don't have to. If you're having trouble doing all 6, pick your top 3, because those top 3 are quite critical. It would be handy if you rank all of them, because it will give the board some insight as to if we found additional resource or something like that, could we take another one in? And we'll consider that once we've got these results in. But certainly 3 are guaranteed to go and get the attention that they need. There are some benefits of lockdown. This is one of them. Any further questions?
I, for one, really appreciate the work you've done here, Steve. This is, it's really nice to see this kind of organization and to see the ideas coming out. I'm looking forward to a time when RChain has a wider profile and we start to get more of these kinds of ideation sessions.
Steve, I had a
I'd love to. Yeah, go ahead, Nora.
Is it just that we vote on the link that you sent in the chat? Sorry if you already said that.
So there's in Discord, there's a link under RChain called DApps Ideas.
Okay,
so
great.
it's in this line here.
Okay.
I think so. You can see DApps Ideas, row 15 on the README. So
Okay.
stick your rankings into that channel, and that would be great. One thing to say about this is that thank you for your kind words, Greg. But in truth, the hard work is done by each and every one of the submissions. All I did was I just did a bit of organising. That's all, and facilitated. And what I've tried to do and I hope it will be a template for future activities like this, is to be as transparent as possible about how we were presenting the ideas, how we should rank the ideas. And so I've involved the community at every step of the way, and looked for ideas from the community as to how to do this. I appreciate not all of you, it's not all of everyone's forte to think about these things, but going forward, you know, I would certainly welcome any ideas that people have about how to run these, any experiences that, you know, when you look back retrospectively, maybe not now, but soon, you know, let me know what you would have done better, what you would have done, well, what you would have done different that you think would make it even better. So I'm interested in getting the even better ifs with respect to the process, because I've tried to make it a very sort of cooperative and collaborative process. So hopefully this will just be the first of several.
Well, indeed. I mean, one of the things I really liked about the whole thing was that it was a model for you know, community engagement, right? I mean, there's no reason we couldn't use this model as a way to vet business items for the October meeting, as an example, right?
Yeah.
People, right? And this is a perfectly decent rubric or template for people to start, you know, putting together the items of business, and you know, that way we could have a much less of a scramble as we usually do in, you know, starting from August to October, you know, to try to get you know, things together, and so that we have a decent annual members meeting.
Yeah.
So I would like for people
one thing that I'd love to do, but only after we've got the investment decks done for the 3 winners. After that, one thing that I would love to do is to run an ideation session, not about the technology, not about technology ideas, but about how we collaborate and govern ourselves, how we become decentralized and yet remain effective. And you know, I'm sure that lots of the members out there will have lots of ideas about things that you could do to move along that trajectory. I think it would be a marvelous idea to have an ideation workshop, a couple of sessions where people come along that have some ideas that they want to do, stick them into the governance committee and do the same.
That's great. That's really great. And that actually is a nice segue to another topic I wanted to mention, which is that some people may have encountered Mukara from the governance forum that we ran in February of 2018. So I'd like to let people know that Mukara Meredith, who is my mother, will be having a guest spot on the climate and coordination call this Friday. She'll be speaking to the notion of enlightened feminine leadership and how that relates to decentralization. And this is in connection with a letter I wrote to the board specifically about you know, what the directions that I think the RChain community and the wider global community is going to have to explore when we think about effective decentralization. There are lots and lots of ways to decentralize, but very few of them are, relatively speaking, are going to be effective in the sense of enabling us to continue to move towards a coherent whole and realize the RChain vision. One of the things that I mentioned to the board was that several of the technologies that I was proposing as a part of making that shift towards effective decentralization are, you know, there's lots of good scientific evidence that they do have the kinds of effects that I'm talking about. So anyway, if people are interested in these kinds of issues or just effective decentralization, then please, consider joining the climate coordination call, which happens 8:30 to 9:30 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Anyway, long-winded thing. Any other questions, comments for Steve?
I just wanted to add that perhaps one series of ideation session focused on how we can make things easier for dApp developers. What are all the things we could consider? Because what I see with the community in the education sessions and elsewhere is that the folks that are developing dApps right now, Arthur Grief, Raphael, Theo, and others, they have a perspective on, if we had this, it would be nice kind of a thing. I think we need to capture that in a broader, with the broader goal of, what are the existing communities that we might want to attract to this? Like, is it the community of developers that are doing Solidity stuff? Is it JavaScript developers? Who is it? And then how can we make it very easy for them to get to develop on the platform? So I think that could be a theme for some series of ideations. And I think, there may be a half a dozen or so projects that come out of that. Something to consider.
Sounds good to me. Funnily enough, we've already got the top 3 best enhancements. It would be very nice to have a more focused view. So yeah, I totally support that.
I'm actually surprised, speaking of which, that there wasn't any uptick on a development environment, a blockchain-based development environment. When you think about it, there's an enormous market for developer tools and in particular things that are considered modeling. Just the modeling market alone is tens of billions of dollars, and then when you throw in the developer tools, it's considerably larger. So I think it's really interesting that there's no proposal for a blockchain-based development environment. Because if you want to support dApp developers, one of the things that you might want to do is to give them a decent IDE that was, dog fooded. Okay, to round things out, I will mention that this Sunday, Christian Williams, who is a collaborator with Mike Stay and myself, like Mike, Christian is a PhD student with John Baez at UCR. And Christian submitted a paper on a variation of the ladle idea. So he is able to give a relatively faithful categorical account of namespace logic. So that the approach that he's outlined is in the paper, which he submitted to do a talk on at Applied Category Theory. So we're step by step, we're starting to get more and more engagement on these notions, and it's great that we're starting to see younger mathematicians engaging and coming up with variations of the idea. Specifically, for those who are interested, just a little bit of a flavor. The two innovations that Christian Williams came up with, instead of using a distributive law, he uses sheaves of a theory. So we start. So in general, we have to input the theory that represents the model of computation. and then the question is, how do you get the collection semantics to go with that? And so he uses the sheaves construction as opposed to a distributive law. So that allows for more variation in the kinds of collections that we can consider. So that's nice. And then the other thing is he suggests using second order algebraic theories as the to capture the nominal phenomena like variable binding. So that also turns out to be a very good suggestion. There are several options as Mike and I have talked about on many occasions, but the second order algebraic theories seem to have strike a good balance in terms of all the desiderata. So hopefully his talk gets accepted. And we should be able to see a draft of the paper available for the community in the next few days. Any questions on that? Okie dokie. I think that's all for today's call, unless there are any questions, comments from the community. All right. Thank you all. Stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you, at least some of you, on Friday.